Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me on this my journey into the constraints-led approach for grappling, etc., coaching, the like. So I want to have a chat, just a brief chat, bit of a rant, I suppose, about the Mike Israel Tell, or whatever his name is, and Greg Souders. The main thing that I took away is that this was just another Greg Souders having to explain what he believes, what ecological dynamics is, what he tries to he has to rectify the assumptions and the ideas that they already have entrenched in their mind about what the ecological approach is. I've said this, I actually said this ages ago, that I don't like, when I first started it was the ecological approach. And then I realized that the ecological approach is not what it is, it's CLA. So being specific about CLA is basically a requirement. The ecological approach it's a misnomer, and I'm sure that Greg has said that in that podcast. But what you have is Mike come along, he's science guy, he's going to confirm to everyone that science guy is smarter than Greg, and that Greg is making stuff up, basically, because he was like, oh, well, that's interesting, but this is how we've always done it. And Greg's like, but the evidence and the literature that's based on the evidence says that that's not the case. And he's just like, well, that's not my experience. That's not what I learned in my PhD. And you're like, I don't know. It's a weird appeal to authority to be like, I'm a PhD in motor learning. I'm giving you what appears to be, to me, based on the fact that, you know, a ton of this information that he was speaking about, like literally the stuff that he speaks about, I remember learning in high school, right? Now, obviously not PhD fucking level, before you fucking give me all that, but like the ideas around how he was describing like the motor learning process is stuff that I learnt as a very young person, right? Now, I'm not saying that that's that long ago, but we are talking decades here, all right? So I don't know when Mike got his PhD. I don't know particularly what it was in. But it just blows my mind that this is like up-to-date research, right? Greg gives the fucking backgrounds. He gives the sources. He even gives the sources of the people that Mike's fucking Mike's foundation or understanding comes from. So he's talking about Schmidt and you know, the schema theory and all and this kind of stuff, and going, look, I know what you're talking about, and there is more up-to-date info, and it's saying that that's not it, like that's not the best way to do it. Now, and then fucking people get hung up, and once again, Mike, like every other debate, gets hung up on, yeah, but what happens if I show you a specific way? And then Greg gets, I don't know if he gets frustrated or flustered. I personally think he gets just frustrated, because it's the same shit. The difference this time is that this is a credentialed scientist, apparently, who is looking at it and going, well, you know, the stuff that I learned in my PhD, which, like, I'm not going to tell you when that was, where that's from, site sources or anything, but I can tell you it's wrong. And it's like, Greg's like, well, what about XYZ? What about fucking the, the information from these sources? And it's like, well, I haven't read that. Or, I don't know, because that's not information I'm familiar with. Okay, well, get fucking familiar with it. I just don't understand how people are still, like, a year plus later, sorry, I'm getting animated, but a year plus later, people are, or 2 years now, coming up to 2, yeah, it'll be, is it 2 years? I don't know, fucking, however long, well, yeah, I've been doing this for a year and a bit now, so, like, 2+ years later, and he's still answering the same questions because no one's bothered to fucking go and read the very basicest of basic books. It blows my mind. It fucking blows my mind. Because, honestly, like, these guys are smart dudes, right? Like, Mike's a smart dude. I reckon if he sat down with a fucking book or two, it would make sense to him. I reckon if he sat down with that dynamics of fuck it, that book that took me fucking ages to read because it was pure academia. If he read that, he'd probably be, yeah, actually they got a point, and we wouldn't have this fucking issue. One of the biggest problems that I think people have is they just don't understand the difference between direct perception and the idea of cognizing your environment before action, right? So they've got this predetermined belief, and that predetermined belief precludes them from understanding or trying to understand the idea of direct perception. And I think that's where, that's where people go wrong. And when I say people go wrong, I think that's where the frustration comes, is the idea that you are constantly perceiving and acting on your environment as an organism, versus you are making a copy of the world in your brain, storing that copy in a mental model that you are then fixing mentally for any variations in that model before acting upon it. Like to me, that doesn't make sense. To many, many, many people out there in this world, it doesn't make sense. And to the fact that I can make something, I can constrain a game to make something emerge, right? I can constrain a game, not give explicit instructions, and have something emerge that is a technique, right? Now, I can guarantee you that I can do that better through a constraints-led method and get people to have that emerge against a live resisting opponent faster than if I showed them something, gave them direct instruction, told them exactly the pathway to go, showed them exactly the pathway to go. And step by stepped it out. I bet you, actually that'd be a good experiment. Just take someone fucking straight off the street and create a constrained game. Like, obviously that's kind of cheating in many ways. There was a question on the Discord about, and it was a decent question, why isn't there just like a plug and play set of games? And it's like, because if you are an ecological dynamics informed coach, then there is no such thing as kind of a straight plug and play, because if you've got more than one student, then you have multiple constraints, task constraints, ability constraints, personal constraints, environmental constraints, social constraints. Like, you understand that there are so many, oh my God, I'm about to say this, intersecting constraints, that a plug and play, while it is potentially a decent way to get started, it for an ecological dynamics informed coach, that employs CLA, it's ecological and it's dynamic. So I got to look more into dynamical systems theory, but I've been looking more into ecological psychology, and it makes sense. And I just don't think that Mike would read this stuff, would read the results that these academics have got, and then turn around and go, well, actually no, but I'll still do direct instruction with sequenced with a sequenced pathway. I highly doubt that they would. They would, and as I've said, he's going to go away, he's going to do some reading, and then he's going to come back and he's going to go, I was right, it's all of this stuff's very interesting, and then slowly his training, how he teaches, will just move slowly towards a fully CLA approach, because once you start doing it and once you start employing it, the results speak for themselves. That's the bottom line.